A Stylite, a pillar saint, is a type of Christian ascetic who live on pillars, preaching, fasting and praying. Stylites believe that the mortification of the bodies would help ensure the salvation of the souls. Stylites were common in the early days of the Byzantine Empire, and the first Stylite was probably Simeon Stylites the Elder, who climbed a pillar in Syria in 423 and remained there until his death 37 years later. Stylites today, such as Maxime Qavtaradze, continue to devote their lives to God atop pillars. Ascetic precedents. Palladius of Galatia tells us of a hermit in Palestine who dwelt in a cave on the top of a mountain, and who from the space of 25 years never turned his face to the west, so that the sun never set on his face. St. Gregory of Nazianzus speaks of a solitary who stood upright for many years together, absorbed in contemplation, without ever lying down. Theodore assures us that he had seen a hermit who had passed 10 years in a tub suspended in midair from poles. Simeon Stylites and his contemporaries. There seems no reason to doubt that it was the ascetic spirit manifested in such examples as these which spurred men on to devise new and more ingenious forms of self-mortification, and which in 423 led Simeon Stylites the Elder first of all to take up his abode on the top of a pillar. Critics have recalled a passage in Lucian which speaks of a high column at Hierapolis Bambus, to the top of which a man ascended twice a year and spent a week in converse with the gods. But the Catholic Encyclopedia argues that it is unlikely that Simeon had derived any suggestion from this pagan custom. In any case, Simeon had a continuous series of imitators, particularly in Syria and Palestine. Daniel the Stylite may have been the first of these. He had been a disciple of Simeon and began his rigorous way of life shortly after his master died. Daniel was a Syrian by birth, but he established himself near Constantinople, where he was visited by both the Emperor Leo and the Emperor Zeno. Simeon the Younger, like his namesake, lived near Antioch. He died in 596, and had for a contemporary a hardly less famous Stylite, Saint Alypius, whose pillar had been erected near Hadrianopolis in Paphlagonia. Alypius, after standing upright for 53 years, found his feet no longer able to support him, but instead of descending from his pillar lay down on his side and spent the remaining 14 years of his life in the position. Roger Collins, in his early medieval Europe, tells us that in some cases two or more pillar saints of differing theological viewpoints could find themselves within calling distance of each other, and would argue with one another from the columns. Other Stylites. St. Luke the Younger, another famous pillar hermit, lived in the 10th century on Mount Olympus, but he also seems to have been of Asiatic parentage. Daniel the Stylite lived on his pillar for 33 years after being blessed by and receiving the cowl of St. Simeon the Stylite. There were many others besides these who were not so famous, and even women Stylites were known. One or two isolated attempts seem to have been made to introduce this form of asceticism into the West, but it met with little favor. In the East, cases were found down to the 12th century. In the Russian Orthodox Church it lasted until 1461, and among the Ruthenians even later. For the majority of the pillar hermits, the extreme austerity of the lives of the Simeons and of Alypius was somewhat mitigated. Upon the summit of some of the columns a tiny hut was erected as a shelter against sun and rain, and other hermits of the same class among the Miaphysites lived inside a hollow pillar rather than upon it, but the life was one of extraordinary endurance and privation. In recent centuries this form of monastic asceticism has become virtually extinct. However, in modern-day Georgia, a monk of the Orthodox Church, Fr. Maxime is restoring with aid from a local villages a small 1200-year-old monastic chapel on top of Katsky Pillar. The pillar is a natural rock formation jutting upwards from the ground to a height of approximately 140 feet. It was known to be used by Stylites as late as the 15th century, when foreign occupation by the Islamic Ottoman Empire brought an end to the practice. Upon completion, Fr. Maxime hopes to take up residence on top of Katsky as a Stylite monk. A film documentary on the project is planned. Popular culture. The American Alvin Shipwreck. Kelly made a popular promotional career as a flagpole sitter in the 1920s and 30s. The vertigo stunt performed by David Blaine on the 22nd of March 2002 was in part inspired by the Pillar Saints, as he declared in the TV documentary about the stunt. A song named Stylites was written by the Greek singer-songwriter Thanasis Constantine in 1998. Fiction. In Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, the title character encounters a Stylite who prays by metania and uses the pedal motion to Socrates describes as Saint Stylites. Umberto Eco's Bordellino temporarily becomes a Stylite towards the end of the book. Luis Buñuel's Simon del Desierto is a humorous film about the life of a Stylite. In Terry Pratchett's Small Gods, a book from the Discworld series, a character named St. Ungulant lives on top of a pole. In the episode Souvenirs of the TV series M***ASH Corporal, Klinger sets a pole-sitting record. In Anatoly France's ties Paphnus on his path to damnation becomes a Stylite but unwittingly falling to temptation. In Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, pole standing was a rite of passage for a native tribe. A Stylite-type figure is featured in the first 2 episodes of the 2nd season of the HBO series The Leftovers.